I've just been driving through Dartmoor. It's another national park in England. And we've come to a place called Wistman's Wood. We're about to climb up to it. Because it's actually a forest on the top of a hill. An oak forest of pygmy oaks. Small oak trees that grow straight out of the granite rocks there. That's odd because the moors, as you can see, don't really have many trees. 5,000 years ago, there were some trees here. There were forests all over this region, according to pollen counts and the researcher scientists. And the Neolithic farmers started cutting it all down so they could farm here instead. But nowadays, there's not that much farming. It's a bit like Exmoor. You can farm animals here. You can grow a few pine trees, but you can't really farm many crops. But we know that the people, even in the Bronze Age after the Neolithic, when the Beaker people came, they all lived here. Because on the hill around Wistman's Wood, there are 80 huts, or the remains of 80 huts, have been detected by archaeologists. So this was a place that the British people were living on. And Wistman's Wood I've come to today because it has a very strong folkloric history, which is very interesting. And it's a kind of folklore that goes all across Europe. It's the folklore that pertains to the Wild Hunt. The name Wistman's Wood refers to a Devonshire dialect word, wist, which is kind of like an elf or something like that. So it kind of means the elf man's wood. But it's not certain. Some people think it may be a variation of wise man's wood, but I don't think that etymology is correct. That sounds like folk etymology. Now, the thing about Wistman's Wood is that it's a scary place. Many people find it odd, the way the trees grow. It's the highest forest around, and the trees are presumably the only forest remaining on Dartmoor, because no one planted it, although there is one folkloric story about a woman planting the forest there. But it's not true that anyone went up to the hill and planted acorns into the hills, into the rocks. So what seems most likely is that the oak forests that covered the area, when they were taken down in the Neolithic, they left up the ones on the rocky top of the mountain because they were no good. You couldn't grow anything there anyway. And ever since then, some struggling oaks have managed to survive up on top for thousands of years. And they look weird, like kind of eerie. And it's no wonder then that you get folkloric stories. And the main folkloric story that the locals are afraid of, why they don't want to be in the wood at night, is the idea that that is in fact a kennel for the evil hounds of the mysterious hunt that is led by the nighttime hunter up there. And these ferocious hounds are said to be black with glowing red eyes, and if you were to be caught there, it would be a great misfortune if the hunt was to come across you at night. Now, some of you who are familiar with folklore will know about the wild hunt, which is found all around Britain and other parts of Europe. Many people might think that the wild hunt, because it has associations with Arthurian folklore, is in fact a Celtic thing. And of course, early antiquarians, 19th century, they always believed Wistman's Wood to be very, very old, and actually that it was some kind of druid's sacred place. Now, it could be a druid's sacred place, but there's no evidence of that. We don't know, we have no archaeological or any textual evidence saying that druids used Wistman's Wood, although it's perfectly possible they did. But the fact that King Arthur is a kind of Celtic figure originally, as I mentioned in my King Arthur video, might make people think that. But if we look in this book by Geoffrey Ashe, Mythology of the British Isles, he says the following: the Anglo-Saxons did make a contribution to Arthurian folklore. This was the wild hunt. Originally a gallop among the clouds by Woden and his Nordic companions, it became, in Britain, a more elaborate affair. Among the new huntsmen were Gwynapnud with his white, red-eared hounds, and Arthur himself in some spectral guise. The wild hunt spread to the continent as the chasse arteux. The huntsmen summoned ghosts of the dead and the souls of unbaptized infants. Their visitations, especially with hounds, gwyns or others, could be portentous of doom. So as we can see, this figure of the wild hunt, a hunt of spectral figures across the sky at night, was associated with King Arthur in Britain, and it's quite possible that the Wistman's Wood was as well. But we know that there are that is probably also more originally a Woden, an Odinic thing, and even on this very moor there are places named after Grim, which is another name for Odin. We can find more connections between the British mythology and the continental Germanic mythology regarding the Wild Hunt in Jacob Grimm's Teutonic mythology, when he was an ethnographer who collected the stories of folklore among Germanic peasants across Europe in the 19th century. And so here we have a reference to the British version of the Wild Hunt. In Gervase of Tilbury's time, the British woods already rang with King Arthur's mighty hunt. And the Complaint of Scotland says, Arthurach nicht, he ride on nicht, with golden spear and candle licht. The Elf Queen and the Fays have already been spoken of, and Shakespeare, he wrote that how Herne the Hunter, another name for this leader of the hunt, doth all the winter time at still midnight walk round about an oak. Now, Herne the Hunter and Arthur both fill the same role in folklore of the leader of the wild hunt, this spectral, spooky hunt. Part of the mythology of the wild hunt is connected to unbaptized children who haven't been brought into Christianity. There's a fear that they somehow become a part of this ancient pagan force, the wild hunt. Grimm writes of the unchristened babes that instead of straggling singly on the earth as fires, they sweep through the forest and air in whole companies with a horrible din. This is the widely spread legend of the furious host, the furious hunt, which is of high antiquity, and interweaves itself now with gods and now with heroes. Look where you will, it betrays its connection with heathenism. And here we hear the specific example of the connection to Woden. That the wild hunter is to be referred to, Woden, is made perfectly clear by the Mecklenburg legends. Often of a dark night with airy hounds will bark on open heaths, in thickets at crossroads. The countryman well knows their leader, Wode, and pities the wayfarer that has not reached his home yet, for Wode is often spiteful, seldom merciful. It is only those who keep in the middle of the road that the rough hunter will do nothing to. That is why he calls out to travellers, midden in den weg. A peasant was coming home tipsy one night from town, and his road led him through a wood, where he hears the wild hunt, the uproar of the hounds, and the shout of the huntsman up in the air. Midden in den weg, cries the voice, but he takes no notice. Suddenly, out of the clouds, there plunges down right before him a tall man on a white horse. Are you strong? Says he. Here, catch hold of this chain. We'll see which can pull the hardest. The peasant courageously grasped the heavy chain, and up flew the wild hunter into the air. The man twisted the end round an oak that was nearby, and the hunter tugged in vain. Haven't you tied your end to the oak? Asked Wode, coming down. No, replied the peasant. Look, I'm holding it in my hands. Then you'll be mine up in the clouds, cried the hunter, as he swung himself aloft. The man, in a hurry, knotted the chain round the oak again, and Wode could not manage it. You must have passed it round the tree, said Wode, plunging down. No, answered the peasant, who had deftly disengaged it. Here I have got it in my hands. Were you heavier than lead, you must up into the clouds with me. He rushed up as quick as lightning, but the peasant managed as before. The dogs yelled, the wagons rumbled, and the horses neighed overhead. The tree crackled to the roots and seemed to twist round. The man's heart began to sink, but no, the oak stood its ground. Well pulled, said the hunter. Many's the man I've made mine. You are the first that ever held out against me. You shall have your reward. On went the hunt, full cry. Hallo, hallo, wol, wol! The peasant was slinking away, when from unseen heights a stag fell groaning at his feet. And there was Woden, who leaps off his white horse and cuts up the game. "Thou shalt have some blood and a hind quarter to boot." "My lord," quoth the peasant, "thy servant hath neither pot nor pail." "Pull off thy boot," cries Woden. The man did so. "Now walk, with blood and flesh, to wife and child." At first terror lightened the load, but presently it grew heavier and heavier, and he had hardly strength to carry it. With his back bent double and bathed in sweat, he at length reached his cottage, and behold, the boot was filled with gold, and the hind quarter was a leathern pouch full of silver. Here it is no human huntmaster that shows himself, but the veritable god on his white steed. Many a man has he taken up into his cloudy heaven before. The filling of the boot with gold sounds antique. And actually, all across Europe you can find such stories. Herne the Hunter, Arthur, Odin, whatever they call him. He is a noble huntsman who carries souls and the night up into the heavens, rather like Odin with his Einherja in the Valkyries, taking the chosen dead to Valhall. I think as we walk through Wistman's Wood, we might understand the psychology of those peasants who created and maintained these folkloric stories of this fearsome hunter and the hounds barking through the night. So this is Wistman's Wood. You can see why the locals would associate it with wists, or the pixies, or elves, or whatever, some kind of supernatural force. It's this moss growing on these granite stones on everything, and these branches don't ever really go any higher than a man. The trees stay so low because they're starved of space for their roots. But it's interesting, you can see on the whole hillside there are no trees except on this area where all these large granite rocks are. And the granite rocks are what have preserved these oak trees for so long. I mean, not the specific trees, they're only a few hundred years old, but I mean, their forefathers have been here for much, much longer. Now I can tell you that the name of the mysterious wild huntsman who plagues those who stay in this forest after dark is not locally known as Arthur, nor is it Herne the Hunter, nor is it Woden. Instead, he is known as Crochan, and locally there is another site of interest called Crochan Tor, and that is a pile of rocks on top of a hill. And the thing about Crochan Tor and old Crochan, who the people here fear so much, is that he is meant to be a personification of Dartmoor itself, and there are legends of farmers who come here. One particular wealthy farmer from Manchester who came down here and tried to make a fortune for himself, and was visited by old Crochan, who warned him that if he tried to drain the bogs, it would be in fact his wallet that was drained, and that he would be ruined. And he said, old Crochan said, "If you so much as scratch my back with a plough, I will see you ruined." So it happened. The Manchester farmer was ruined and lost all his wealth trying to make this soil fertile and trying to raise crops here. And no one raises crops here to this day. Old Crochan likes the idea of Dartmoor as a wild place, and that's actually how the hikers and tourists who come here also like it. But old Crochan, this sort of semi-personification of a landmark, but also is sort of seen as a god. Perhaps the name Crochan, it was once the name of a local god among the Celts or something, I don't know. But one thing for certain, he has assumed the role that Woden is associated with in that archaic story of the Wild Hunt. And this place is just one of the many in Europe associated with that story.
Hunt.